Hello and welcome to Self Power Now, where empowering women share their stories and advice about life, work, happiness, love, and success. I'm your host, Debbie Giussoni, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. So sit back and enjoy the show. Today, we're talking with Jayne Nakata. Jayne is the host of the #1 podcast for international women living in Japan called Transformations with Jayne, which just, by the way, won a silver recognition at the New Zealand Podcast Awards in the Kiwi Abroad category. She's also the creator of PodLaunch with Jayne, a podcast consulting, coaching, and production business that helps podcasters launch and run their own shows. Through her business, she's created a network of podcasts focused on community and empowering women. Originally from New Zealand, Jayne moved to Fukushima, Japan, about 20 years ago and still resides there with her husband, children, and family dog. Hi, Jayne. Welcome.
Thank you for that wonderful welcome, Debbie. It's great to be on the show.
Well, congratulations. I just found out about your award. So this is very new. And now you'll have to change your whole bio in a good way.
Exactly. It just happened yesterday. So I'm still very excited about this. Yes.
I love when women are recognized for achievements, and we all know we work really hard. And as you know, Jayne, you are my very first guest on the Self Power Now podcast, which I think is quite fitting since you're also my podcast producer. And we got to work out all the kinks in this first episode, right?
We do. So yeah, why not go first and help you along the way? So I'm really excited to be on this journey with you as well, Debbie, to bring your voice out into the world.
Thank you so much.
I think it's a team effort. Yeah.
Yes, it takes a village with everything. But that's not the only reason why I wanted you on the show. In keeping with the theme of the Self Power Now podcast, you have quite an empowering story about resilience. First of all, moving to a foreign country and building a new life for yourself, certainly in and of itself takes a lot of resilience and commitment in terms of, fitting in with the culture and the language. But you also endured a horrific tragedy in 2011 while you were living in a foreign country, which is kind of like a double whammy. Tell us what happened.
Yes, so that was just over 10 years ago now. And I think many of the listeners may remember the triple disaster, it's called, the triple disaster that happened in Japan. That was a massive earthquake that set off a massive tsunami beyond anything anybody had ever predicted happening. And that then set off a nuclear disaster. Now, all of this happened in my backyard, basically, the city where I live in Fukushima Prefecture, which is called Iwaki City. It's located just about 50 kilometers from that nuclear power station, which you have also heard called Fukushima. Right. And that's just up the road, 50 kilometers away.
And I read that 18,000 people were killed in that tsunami.
Yes.
And you were right there and it was in your backyard. I mean, it's the kind of thing we think only happens in the movies, right? Or that happens to someone else. And here I am talking to you and you were right there. Tell me what was happening in your life at that time and that day. Take us through the events.
So on that day, I happened to be 7 months pregnant with my first child. And I'd actually just been to the doctor to have a checkup, as you do. And the doctor had said to me, oh, it's really terrible what's happened in New Zealand, because just 2 weeks earlier, there had been a massive earthquake in my home country in New Zealand. And many Japanese people had actually died in that earthquake, buildings falling down and things. And so I'd had all these commiserations from the doctor that day. And just a few hours later, we were experiencing our own massive disaster. So the earthquake happened. I was just driving out of a parking lot. And I had sort of felt the car moving and thought, oh, what's that? And then I felt the car moving more and I thought, oh, I better stop.
Had you ever been in an earthquake before? Did you know it was an earthquake?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was an earthquake because we have them all the time here. I couldn't tell you how many earthquakes I'd experienced before that day. But so I thought, oh, this is quite a strong one. Okay, I'll just stop the car. And then it just kept going and going. And I thought, wow, I have never experienced anything like this. What do I do? So I jumped out of my car thinking that if something happened, I need to be able to move. I need to be able to run if, something falls down.
Right.
Perhaps being in the car is not the best idea. So I'm 7 months pregnant, standing next to my car.
Kind of hard
because my
to
car was
run at 7
rocking.
months pregnant,
Yeah. I had a bit of a sort of watermelon sort of situation going on in the
I
front
mean, I don't
there.
know how
Yeah.
fit you were. And some people can do a marathon maybe at 7 months pregnant, but that's
Not me.
difficult to
No,
get
I was
around. Yeah.
not. I was not a fit pregnant person, that's for sure. So, yeah, I'm standing there. I'm holding onto the side of the car because that was the only way I could stay standing. And looking around, just everything, like the buildings were screeching and shrieking because they were shaking so much. And yeah, people were screaming as well. I was looking around, seeing it was at a shopping center. So there were other people crouched on the ground because they couldn't stand up, shrieking and screaming. And yeah, it was just really terrible. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced, the worst earthquake I've ever
And
experienced.
what was
Yeah.
going through your mind at that moment? Did you have a dog at the time? Obviously, you had a husband, but did you have a dog at the time? Were you worried about them?
Yeah, I had a little puppy who was at home by himself, luckily in his cage, and I knew he'd be safe, that nothing would fall on him or, he'd be okay. But I was 20 minutes drive away from where he was. And so obviously you have a lot of adrenaline going through your mind, making you function in the sort of fight or flight mode. And so
Right.
my first instinct was to go home. So after the shaking stopped, I went home. I managed to drive home, and just through pure luck, my side of the road was clear. So on the way home, there was things, like fences had toppled over, the
Right,
fence had
right.
toppled over, manholes had popped out of the road. But all of those things were on the other side of the road. So I had the right of way to drive home fairly smoothly, even though the road was sort of shaking and rocking the whole time. So it was very nerve-wracking. And I fully expected to get home and see my house like a pancake.
Yeah.
Just even though I drove past, buildings that were still standing, obviously, got home and found my little puppy was fine. And we'd actually just built our house 6 months earlier. So it was sort of brand
Oh,
new earthquake technology, which was
thank
great.
God for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
where
there
was your
was no,
husband at the time?
so he was actually doing the taxes at the time. So luckily he wasn't very far away. He wasn't at work,
Yes.
and he was able to come home very quickly, and we were able to be at home together. And so we turned on the TV and saw what was happening down on the coast. So the coast is about 5 kilometers or so away from where we live. We're not right on the coast, luckily. We're up on a hill. And so we had no worries about tsunami coming here. But when we turned on the TV, we saw what was happening, and we were just shocked to see those waves coming in and
Right. Oh.
things being swept away before our eyes. And my
And
husband said at that time that when he saw that, his first thoughts were, what is going to happen to that power station that is sitting right on the coast, just 50 kilometers away from us?
right. And eventually 150,000 people had to evacuate, and you were part of that, right?
Yeah, so our city was just outside the evacuation zone, but we were in the path of nuclear fallout, if you want to call it. So at the time, I was getting a lot of messages from my family in New Zealand, like, get out of there, what are you doing? And I just said,
How
we've
do
had
you
a
get
massive
out? I mean, what do you
we've
do?
had a massive earthquake here. I don't even know if the road is open at this point. There was no information about the road. Is it open even? And if we left our house, would we be stuck in a traffic jam and never, be exposing ourselves to more danger than just staying inside your house? Which, if there's a nuclear disaster, that is the first thing you should do, is go inside and turn off all of your fans and, air conditioning units and things. That is
Lock
the
down.
safest
Yeah.
thing you
Lock
can
it
do,
down.
is
Yeah.
to be in your house, not in a car driving through the countryside or trying to get away. So we decided that, first of all, we had enough petrol to leave, because luckily I had filled up the car with petrol a few days earlier. Gasoline for your listeners who don't know what petrol is.
For the US people.
Yeah, for the US people.
But I like how you say it better, petro.
Petrol. And we were actually ahead of the curve or the wave of people panicking to leave. We left it
Mm,
a couple of days earlier because I was getting information from outside of Japan saying, we don't think this is good. And then inside
mm.
Japan, they were saying, it's fine, we've got it under control. They didn't want people to panic, and
They
they
didn't, yeah,
didn't
of
want,
course, of course.
like in Tokyo, there are 10 million people just in that tiny, tiny place. If 10 million people start panicking, then that is a disaster in itself.
Yes,
So the
yes.
government was trying to avoid that. So we left and we drove away from our house. We packed all our belongings, thinking we may never come back here. This could be
Mm,
a ghost town in
yeah.
the future. We packed up all of the things that we would need to never come back again, my dog
Mm.
included, of course.
Of course. Well,
So,
the dog,
and
I mean, I'm a big dog lover. The dog goes, hand in hand
of
with the
course, the
children.
dog
So,
goes with us, right?
of course.
So, yeah, we packed him too, and we just started driving. And we
Yeah.
drove, we were heading towards my husband's family's house, which is luckily for us, he's not from this part of Japan. He's from the other end of Japan, down closer to Osaka, is kind of a main
Mhm.
city that's near there. So we had somewhere to go to. And a lot of
Mm,
people in Japan did not have anywhere to go
right.
because they live near their relatives or they live where they've grown up.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Be
we
thankful for
drove.
small blessings, right? That, who
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
planned
So
that?
this sort of inconvenience of having family all the way across Japan became suddenly a huge benefit to us. And so it was 1,000-kilometer drive, but that
Mm-hmm.
in miles is about 500,
Mm-hmm.
600 miles.
600
And
about, yeah.
we spent 2 days driving to get to my
Mm,
husband's family's house away from what
yeah.
was going on here in my city.
Mm.
And yeah, so the rest is history. And we know now that we were able to come back, but it was many, many months of sort of low grade terror, watching what was happening. Yeah.
Right. But when you live through something like that, it changes your life. Nothing is ever the same. And it changes the way you look at your life, your work, your family, what's important in life. Tragedy has a way of doing that, right? What happened when you came back? You and I have talked briefly about this. A lot in your life had been transformed by that time. And there was a lot of ups and downs, right?
Definitely, the road to recovery was not instant. It was many years of feeling very nervous about living here in
Mm-hmm.
Fukushima, processing what happened, why me, why us here in Fukushima, that
Mm-hmm.
we have to live with this. And in saying that, in the end, the only thing that I lost was my peace of mind in the end. I still have my
Right.
house, my husband still has a job, compared
Mm-hmm.
to people who, just because of a breath of wind, the wind blew the nuclear fallout away from my city. It blew it towards somebody else's city. Somebody
Mm.
else's life was affected more adversely
Yeah.
than mine. So
And there's always, no matter what we go through, right, in life, no matter what tragedy we go through, and sometimes we get very myopic, right, in our thinking because we've, as you said, why me? Why me? Why me? But when you look at the big picture of life, there's always someone who is suffering and people and nations that are suffering more for no reason, luck of the draw or not, or bad luck of the draw, I should say. But you were working at the time before the tragedy, right? And then you came back, and what happened then?
So after a few years, obviously I had small children now to
Hmm.
deal with. So after a few years, I noticed that I wasn't happy.
Hmm.
Even, we'd come through all of this disaster, and that was very distracting for a long time, rebuilding
Yeah.
a city, being part of that. And after a while, we got back to a sort of a normal way of life. Things calmed down. I just noticed I'm not happy. Surely,
Mm.
if I move back to my home country of New Zealand, I'll be happy. And I asked my husband, can we move back to New Zealand? Come on, why are we here? And he said, no, we're not going anywhere. And I was like, what? If we go to New Zealand, I will be happy. And New Zealand's a beautiful, peaceful country. Why
Although
are we
they had an
staying here?
earthquake right before
Right? I mean,
Japan had an earthquake.
apart from earthquakes, yeah.
But were you
And
you were working prior? What were you doing in terms of work prior?
so at that time, I was doing I was working from the circumstances, which was I was an English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And if you live in outside of Tokyo, that's pretty much what your job's going to be in Japan, is being an English teacher. And that was the reason I came to Japan in the first place in
Mm-hmm.
2002, was to be an English teacher. I happened to meet my husband and I stayed on. But
Mm.
it was not necessarily my calling or the thing I'm supposed to be doing. It was just a job that I was doing, and I could get paid reasonable money to do it. And I realized that I wasn't doing anything that for me,
Mm.
anything. It was all revolved around my children, my husband, or doing all of these things I had always done, which was English teaching. And so I thought, well, since my husband is refusing to leave Japan just now, then I have to commit to my life here in
Mm-hmm.
Japan, and I have to commit to my life in Fukushima. So that means I need to take responsibility for my own happiness instead of believing that it
Mm-hmm.
will come from being in this magical place of, New Zealand.
Yeah. It doesn't come from outside of you, that's for
It
sure.
does not. So I know very clearly now that if my husband had agreed and we had moved to New Zealand, it would have been a case of wherever you go, there you are. It would have just
Mm-hmm.
been me unhappy in New Zealand, basically, change the
Yes.
scenery around you.
Yes.
So I started off really small. I made a small, tiny change, and that tiny change was to do one thing a day for me, and that
Mm.
was to exercise.
Mm.
And it
That's
sounds
so,
so
I just
simple,
want,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And one thing a day for you, that is such a hard concept for most women. One thing a day for me, especially women who have children and a family and a dog, right?
And small children, right? And
Mm-hmm.
no childcare,
Yes.
nobody to look after my children for me except my husband who's working. So this one small thing, I am going to prioritize my exercise. And
Mm.
I chose exercise because that was something that I could do no matter what. I could get out, like even if it's dark and raining, I can still go out at 6 o'clock in the morning and exercise
Mm-hmm.
because everybody else is sleeping. I can make it my priority. So whatever is happening in my life, I can still do this. So that's what I started doing.
So did you go from
And
not exercising at all to exercising, and how did you build up? Because a lot of people, the hardest thing is to just get started. How did you go about it?
so I wasn't a zero exerciser before that. I mean, I have a dog, right? So I
Right.
would be walking my dog every day, and I would be pushing my kids in the push chair, their, pram thing
Mm-hmm.
with the dog every day to exercise my dog. So I wasn't starting from zero, but having that sort of baseline really did help. But the thing I started doing was running.
Mm.
And I have never run in my life. I've never been a sporty person. I've always been the bench warmer on every team. I just had this thing, if I can do this, what else could I do? So I got a little bit of advice and I started a C25K program.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got out there in the dark because I didn't want anyone to see me shuffling around, trying to run, running for 1 minute and then like being very, very exhausted for the other 2 minutes that you walk to run again.
Yeah.
But I did it and I got through it. And I thought, well, if I got through that, maybe I can get through the next time, which was 2 days later, try
Yes.
the next C to 5K. And that was where I started from. And just trying something new that I'd always believed could never do because I was always last on sports day in every race. And I did it. And so it also overcame this sort of thing that I had that I'm not a sporty person. That's rubbish. I just was lacking in practice
That
is
that
what
was
the
one of
problem
your
was.
false beliefs, right? That you
One
had
of
to
my
get
false
over.
beliefs. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. We all have that. Or someone tells you when you're young, oh, you can't do that, or you're not sporty. But the great thing about exercise, particularly running, though, is your brain releases all these great endorphins. So it not only has a physical effect on you, it has an emotional effect and gets you to a place of clarity.
Exactly. And it was the mental benefits that helped me to do the next thing. So I was not exercising to lose weight. And I really hope that everyone listening will
Hmm.
at least, if they come away with nothing, is change how you view exercise as a way to have, a better state of mind that you
Yes.
can go out and do something amazing from just exercising. Yeah, it will definitely help you change how you think about things.
I totally
And
agree
yeah.
with that. Yeah. I've been
Mm.
exercising all my life, and I feel like on the days that I can't do anything, I don't feel very good. So once you get started, you understand that concept, but it's so important and it keeps you so grounded.
It does. You process the stresses of the day, feel more positive. You can be a better parent, a more calm mother to those
Important.
children who you are so important to you. I definitely noticed an improvement in so many different areas. And then so I thought, well, what's the next thing? And so the next thing was, wow, look at my calendar. It's full of things I don't like doing. All of these things that are on here are things I've just always done, or somebody said, oh, could you help me? And then it's just stayed there. So I looked at everything on my calendar and I started removing things that were not bringing me joy. And I started
I
saying, I'm not
love
doing
that.
this anymore to people. And it was very interesting to see how that went, because I have been a chronic people pleaser, in my life.
So you had to
And
learn how to say no.
to say, I'm not doing it anymore, or I'm
Yes.
changing how this is going to be. And I sort of watching people's reactions, I got some things that was, I'm quitting this job. And they were like, okay, thanks very much. Bye. And I was like, what? You
Well,
don't
that
need
was
me
really
anymore?
valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not this pivotal person in your organization. Oh, okay.
Everyone is expendable, Jane.
Yeah, well, that was one experience. Another one was, oh, you don't want to do that anymore? Well, how about this instead? And gave me a much better, more fulfilling offer to do different kinds of work. And when I'm available, when I'm free, no, not being tied down to having to be there every week and things. So I
Mhm.
got a lot more freedom for myself. And I made space on my calendar, and all these other amazing offers started coming to me that couldn't come to me
Mm.
before, because my calendar was full of stuff I didn't like to
You
do.
didn't have the space for it. Yeah,
There
even
was no
emotionally.
space
Yeah,
for
you didn't
magic.
have the
Yeah.
space. Yeah. I love
So
that. No space for magic.
no space for magic in my calendar. So yeah, anybody listening, choose one thing. Get rid of it off your calendar and see what happens. You'd be surprised. Yeah.
It's sort of like you feng shuied your calendar,
I did.
because
I
when we,
really
we do that
did.
with houses, it's all about creating space. And when you don't have
Definitely.
space, you can't invite new things in. And if you're holding on to all the old stuff, whether that's grudges or hate or anger, it just blocks. It blocks everything new that could possibly come in. So that was, yeah, you did a little feng shui on your calendar. I love it.
Yeah, and the
I love
next thing was, I live in a rural part of Japan. This is not Tokyo here.
it. Hmm.
There are not many opportunities for foreigners to do anything other than teach English. So at the time, I thought, well, what can I do instead of these things that I don't like doing? If I could have any job, what would I be doing? And it came to me that I really like organizing events. I love bringing people together. And so I just started doing that. And then somehow I created a job for myself as an event coordinator, as a retreat coordinator, and I would bring people to my city to take advantage of the fact that there are all of these empty hotels. We call them ryokans, a traditional Japanese inn. You might have seen
Hmm.
them
Hmm.
on TV or something. They're beautiful inns that nobody was staying in because people were just in the habit of not coming to Fukushima anymore, thanks to what had
Right.
happened, 5, 6, 7 years ago at this point. So yeah, I just started experimenting with that. And so creating my dream job for myself. So I realized, oh, I can do anything I want, even though I live in Fukushima, which is one of the worst places in the world to live, apparently, because of the
Or so
nuclear
they were
disaster,
saying to you.
right? So the media will tell you if you look it up.
Don't listen to the media.
Exactly. So that gave me this sense of power, of not
Mm,
control. You cannot control your life, but that I can take responsibility.
right.
I
You can
don't have to,
empower it. You can
yeah,
empower it with the
you can empower
situation that you're in.
yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't
Exactly.
have to look out there for, and I know a lot of people when they're thinking about changing a job, they will just immediately go out and say, what jobs are available?
Mm.
Instead of deciding first, what do I want? What
Or
am I
even what
going to
kinds of
do?
things do I like to do? Not even a
Yeah.
job,
What do
but
I
what
want to
kind?
do?
Yeah. Do I
Yeah.
like to be with people? Do I not? Do I like to do alone? Do I like writing? Just explore where your passions lie. And that will
Exactly.
lead you to the next step, or even do a vision board with the things that you like. Well, what would be the perfect job for me? Well, something where I could, work from home, or something where I can dress up, or something where I could be with a lot of people. It's all up to you.
Exactly. And experimenting with, does this idea that I've had actually translate into something I actually like to do when I actually do it? A lot of the
Hmm.
things that we think about, oh, I'd love to work there or I'd love to do this, when you actually do them, then you get some feedback. Oh, that was harder than I thought. And I didn't like that part where I had to do blah, or that was amazing. I need to do more of that.
So it took you a
Then,
while to get to the
oh, yeah.
podcasting and all that. I mean, you did a
Mm.
few things along the way, and you ended up doing the podcast.
Exactly. So one of the things that I learned through that was that finally I came out of my, I have to say it was self-imposed sort of prison, but I just cut myself off from the world because I lived in
Mm,
Fukushima. I did not want to be criticized by people who have no idea what it's like to actually be in Fukushima for
hmm.
living here.
Hmm.
Because if you look at the media, you would say, well, Jayne, you're an idiot. Why are you living in that place? And I'm like, I'm not an idiot. Science
Yes.
tells me that it's perfectly safe to live here, actually.
Yes.
You are just reading the media, which really wants to scare you
Mm,
about Fukushima. So
mm,
I didn't want to be criticized by people for my choice to stay here, because a lot of foreigners did leave. And at the
right.
time that we just didn't know whether it was safe to be here or not. But we know now that it's completely safe to be here, compared, it's equally safe to be in Tokyo.
Hmm.
And we've had our once in a thousand year disaster here in Fukushima. So
What's the
I'm
chance? Yeah.
right. The
Of it
chances are good
happening
for me
again.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
COVID sneaks up on you in the last couple of years, which probably seemed like nothing to you, right?
Well, at the time when it came along, I realized that there are going to be some things happen here. So I knew that to just sort of think, well, what could happen? And how could I be prepared for this? And I think it was Italy that really caught my notice, because at the time I wasn't living in Fukushima. I happened to be living in Sweden at the time, which is another story. But I
You
was
do get
noticing,
around, Jayne.
yeah, I do get around. We'd been sent to live in Sweden for what we thought was 3 years. And when COVID came along, I saw that and I thought, if that's happening in Italy, that could happen here in Sweden, or, wherever you are in the world.
Yes.
And so I just went around quietly, and I let my friends know about it too. I just went around quietly preparing. So I had toilet paper. I had medicine on stock. I had a month's worth of food. I had,
Yes.
drinking water. I just thought, what could go wrong? What could happen? What services could we lose because of this? And I prepared
Mm,
for all of those things. So when it happened, I wasn't worried. And this is something I hope everyone will take away, is that you can prepare for things like this as much as you can. You can
right.
have, for natural disasters, or things like the pandemic, you can prepare a lot of things. And when you are prepared, it's a huge weight off your mind, and you can just go and get on with your life. So on the day when we had that massive earthquake and tsunami, I was actually prepared for that. I did have food, I did have water, and
Mm,
alternative sources of power, or ways to
hmm.
cook, all of those things I had prepared.
And Petro
So,
in the car.
and petrol in the car, another bonus.
Yes.
And, my bathtub was full of water because I knew to prepare. And
Mm,
so we didn't have to run around like crazy people, were like going to the supermarket and frantically buying
mm,
things. We could just stay at home and be safe.
yes.
And that was really nice. And so the same thing in the pandemic. I didn't have to go and fight people at the supermarket for toilet paper, because I already had it a month or two supply in my cupboard, because I just knew to do
Mm.
that. So that's
But did you
something
have to
that
go
is,
back to Japan then during COVID?
yeah. So my husband's company sent us on assignment, so they were responsible for our health and safety. And for them, they couldn't see that we were safe in Sweden, so they ordered us to return to Japan. And so it was sort of the irony of having to fly across the world in a pandemic to get back to Japan to
When
be
nobody
safe.
wanted to be on an airplane, for
Exactly.
sure.
It was the
Wow.
most bizarre trip I've ever had, but it was really lovely, actually, because there was nobody on the plane. It was just us.
You
There was nobody at customs. There was nobody, there was no
oh,
queues. It was not your usual traveling experience. And I just thought, wow, I'm not sure I can go back to traveling like normally after this.
right.
It's just
I
such.
remember I had to speak at an event in New York. I live in California, and it was the week after 9/11. And I
Right.
got on a plane and I thought, wow, this is the most pleasurable experience I have ever had on a plane in my life. And I had
Yeah.
traveled a lot for that reason. Nobody was around. Everyone was, high alert, very conscious of, being kind and considerate towards others. It was really, really interesting.
Very
Jayne, any
surreal experience. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Any last words of wisdom about resilience for our listeners? Many people are in crisis mode still from COVID, or they might be dealing with their own challenges right now. And you've been so inspiring with your story and what you've gone through. Any last words you want to impart?
Something that always helps me is just to switch off the news
Yes.
and
Big
just be
one.
really
Huge.
aware of what you're reading. And I know from being in the news myself as the lone New Zealander stuck in Fukushima, when that happened, I was misquoted in the news a lot. So I could see with my own eyes, oh, well, this is what happens to a news story when it gets
Mm.
passed over to the,
It's like the game
to the,
telephone, right? Yeah.
yeah,
By the
right.
time it gets out, it's been
Exactly. How
definitely
many things?
distorted. Exactly.
Yeah, how many things have been distorted? Exactly. So, first of all, I don't read the news unless I absolutely have to, and just really cut myself off from that unnecessary negativity. Yeah.
Yeah, negativity. It's negativity. And it's actually one of the suggestions I always make to people that are going through tough times in their lives is take a break from the media
Yeah.
because the media is very, very negative. That's how they get listeners or viewers or whatnot.
Ourselves.
They
Yeah.
go for the lowest common denominator. So if you want to feel good, yeah, don't go listening to media every day. You'll just get
Yeah.
sucked in. Yeah.
Yeah. And then look at what you do have. I think in this time where a lot of people have lost things,
Mm-hmm.
you may have lost a job, lost family members, lost peace of mind. If you can bring your mind away from what you've lost, which is so easy to go to all the things you've lost, all the things you've had taken away from you, and
Mm-hmm.
look at what you do have. Oh, I do still have my home. I do still have a body that works so that I can get another
Mm-hmm.
job.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things that you have,
Yeah. Go
then
into a place of gratitude.
then you
Absolutely.
can find even a tiny, tiny piece of gratitude. That's the seed for a little bit more gratitude and a little bit more feeling at
Mm-hmm.
peace. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're in that peaceful state of mind, then you can have hope, right? And then you
Right.
can maybe notice something. Oh, look, there's an opportunity for me here. Or, you can just feel better. And this is what we're all striving for as humans, is to feel at peace.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're actually looking for. It doesn't matter what your car looks like or your job,
Mm-hmm.
or we just want to feel happy, which is
Yes.
a feeling of being at peace.
Yes.
So if we can find that even for a few minutes a day,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're aiming for in life, all of us.
I
And you
love
can
that.
find that. It's a choice to spend some time looking at that and turn off the news, turn off the negative, sort of focusing on all the things you've lost. And we've lost a lot of things over the years. Either here in Fukushima, our peace of mind, having to leave our homes, thinking you've lost your home, thinking you've
Mm-hmm.
lost your
Mm-hmm.
job, all of those things. And then to have it happen again in COVID
Yeah.
as well. So, yeah, it really is a choice to decide, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for what I can.
You're absolutely right. The choice is key. Yeah. We can't always choose what happens around us or in the world or even in our lives sometimes, but we can choose how we react to it. And talking to you and your story, you chose to go to the route of self-care. You chose to exercise. You chose to figure out what made you happy. And if everybody could just get to that point, they'd be a lot happier. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. And thank you for your presence here today with us, Jayne. And if our listeners would like to connect with Jayne, or perhaps some of you might want to start your own podcast, you can find all that information on our podcast show notes.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. If anyone would like to come over and listen to Transformations with Jayne, you'll hear a lot of amazing women doing things in a strange land. It's quite a strange land here in Japan. And women here have a lot of challenges to do the things they want to do. Imagine starting a business in a foreign country, all of those things. So if you're
Yes.
interested to hear about that, yes, definitely come over and listen over at the Transformations with Jayne podcast. And thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show today, Debbie.
Yes,
It's been a lot
first
of fun.
one. Thank you, Jayne. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Self Power Now. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with others, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, and join our community on selfpowernow.com and receive 3 free happiness gifts. And while you're there, if you're looking for more ways to be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, check out my books and new online courses. Until next time, this is Debbie Jasoni wishing you self-power now.